Hi, I hope you're doing well. If you're new here, my name is Khadija and this is my July reading wrap up. There was a lot going on this month, and for a good couple of weeks, it felt like every book that I picked up wasn't working for me. Not because they were bad, but because I was the problem. I don't know why, but I had a rough patch this month where I was borderline in a reading slump and I just didn't have the motivation to read. But thankfully I fought it. I fought hard. Things are looking up now. I was thinking I might just do stats for the big videos rather than every monthly reading wrap up, like the end of year wrap up or a mid-year wrap up. And instead of throwing my DNFs at the end of the video, I think I'm just gonna do it chronologically now. Okay, let's get started. So we actually started off the month very strong. I read The Young Will Remember by Eve J. Chung, which is a standalone historical fiction novel. This was an anticipated read for me because I read Eve's other novel, her debut novel, Daughters of Shandong, I think last year, and I really loved it. I couldn't put it down. I thought the writing was gorgeous and I learned a lot from reading that book. I was super excited to read this and it lived up to my expectations. This is set during the Korean War in 1950, which is also known as the Forgotten War because of the lack of media coverage and the way it is still largely overlooked in present time. Our main character is Ellie Chang. She is a Chinese American journalist. She is mainly covering the war, and at the beginning of the novel, Ellie begs to tag along on this military flight to cover a battle in North Korea. But the plane is targeted and they crash land, so suddenly Ellie is surrounded by enemy soldiers. She is about to be apprehended, or worse, until out of the blue, this woman comes out of nowhere and she claims that Ellie is her long-lost daughter. The woman, whose name is Emma, takes Ellie to the Pak family, who are a pastor family, and this is also where Emma is staying. So with no way of contacting her family, no way of contacting her work, Ellie is essentially stranded in a foreign country, and all she can do is just hope that she can make it back to the front lines and survive this war. I could not put this book down. It really resonated with me, and I walked away from it wanting to learn more and wanting to read more because there was so much that I didn't know about the Korean War. The title, The Young Will Remember, is the thesis of the book, essentially. I think at the core of this book is the emphasis on how crucial it is that young people stay informed on our histories as well as our present to keep the memories of survivors alive, especially the women who suffer so many unimaginable atrocities during war and are almost never mentioned because so many of their stories are forgotten. This is very much a story about women and women's experiences during war. It focuses on the millions of women who suffered unimaginable trauma and sexual violence during the Korean War at the hands of the Japanese Imperial Army. Our main character, Ellie, doesn't experience that, but we hear a lot of accounts of stories from other women who are important to the story have experienced that kind of violence. The author is also a human rights lawyer who has worked directly with victims. A lot of research and expertise and knowledge went into this book as well. So if that's a topic that is triggering to you, please be mindful of that if you choose to read it. I thought it was beautifully written and haunting, and it goes without saying that I will read anything that Eve writes. That was The Young Will Remember by Eve J. Chung. Then we had a dip, a very early dip in the month. I had my only DNF. It was my second read of July and it was a DNF. The book is Shadow Reaper by Lynette Noni, which is a young adult fantasy duology. It is the first in the duology. It's set in a city called Araval, and the city is currently being plagued by this black mist that kills everyone it touches. And the antagonists in the story are what they call reapers, and they essentially steal magic from children specifically. Our main character's name is Viridia. She has spent her entire life training to hunt the Reapers, and it's personal for her because the Reapers are led by the person who murdered her parents, and that person is called the Reaper Priest. The other main character's name is Reeve Ashton, and him and Viridia, they have bad blood. When that incident happened where Viridia's parents were targeted, Reeve essentially chose the dark side and he chose to work with the Reaper Priest, which is where he is now. In the beginning of the story, Viridia's syndicate, the place that she trains at with all of these other people who are also training, they capture Reeve. Her and Reeve have their first meeting in like 10 years. They haven't seen each other since the incident with her parents. And the story kicks off when he gives Viridia an offer she can't refuse. I DNF'd this at 16%. I know, it's so early. I know I didn't even get into the meat of the story. Listen, hear me out. My intuition is almost always spot on when it comes to books that I feel like are not going to be for me. I had that feeling very early on, not because the book challenged me, but because of the complete opposite reason. I felt like the writing was just not good. And you could say, which would be fair, you only read 16% of the book, you can't judge the whole book. But this book came across to me as a recycled romantasy. I have been very, very, very picky with the romantasy books that I pick up because I find that so many of them just mash a bunch of tropes together. I'm not saying that this is all romantasy books, but I have found personally that a lot of the ones recently being published are very similar. I just don't have the interest or patience anymore to keep reading what feels like the same book. So just to give you an example, we are told that our two main characters, Viridia and Reeve, have a history together and they now have bad blood. We don't have any emotional foundation. We don't have any emotional connection to them, which is totally normal and understandable because we are at the very beginning of the book. So you're thinking, okay, when they meet, we're going to learn more about them and how they interact with each other. And there's probably going to be some kind of build up to create tension. The first scene we get with Viridia and Reeve, she describes him as, there was something too dark and dangerous about him to be called pretty, but he was without a doubt beautiful to behold. He'd been cute 7 years ago, but now he was devastating. You know, when they say like 3 strikes, you're out. This was like the first strike where I was like, yeah, why are we still describing male main characters as dark and dangerous in 2026? Then very soon after this paragraph, Reeve sees that she has like some kind of bruise or injury on her face. He does the "who hurt you?" I was like, what's going on? Like, I don't know these people. I don't know these characters enough to feel something when they say something like that. I will eat up a "who hurt you" scene, but I need to have some background before that scene can make me feel something. This is like the very beginning of the book. I know I barely got a quarter through, so who knows? Maybe the writing got stronger and there was some really good plot twists, but I just could not connect with the writing and I don't know what else to say. Like, I just knew that this was not the right book for me. So I just figured it was best to put it down and move on. If you loved it, I love that for you. I really do. That was Shadow Reaper by Lynette Noni. My next read, thankfully, I enjoyed, and that was In the Country I Love by al-barkawi, which is a debut young adult contemporary standalone. This is pitched as two Iraqi-American best friends confront dark truths about their families in the wake of a devastating crime. Our main characters are two Muslim teenage boys, Khalid and Yasser, who are both struggling with their faith in different ways, and there are a lot of family secrets that slowly unravel as you keep reading. A lot of this book centers on the teenage Muslim American experience, which unfortunately always entails some form of Islamophobia and belittling and racism, and these characters experience a lot of that in a way that I felt was very realistic. This is also compared to All My Rage by Sabaa Tahir, which is a book that I really love, and I can totally see why that is, because there is a lot of focus on the struggles that many Muslim teenagers have living in America and the US. It really made my heart ache because I've been there. I think a lot of us have been there, especially if you've grown up in the West. It's so hard when you're dealing with growing pains as a teenager and feeling not just out of place, but also feeling like you have to comply with how people see you. And you feel like you have to assimilate into your environment completely. And in the process, you can lose yourself and feel ashamed of your heritage and identity. And I thought that that was written very well in this book in a way that will make you very emotional. And I think a lot of people will be able to relate to it and hopefully come away from it knowing that things are going to get better. One thing that was a little confusing to me was the POVs, like the structure of the book and the constant switching of POVs. We are mostly in the heads of two main characters, Khalid and Yasser, but all of a sudden about halfway through the book, if I'm remembering correctly, we are suddenly introduced to another POV that becomes very frequent as family secrets start coming to light. I just felt like it was a little hard to keep track of everything that was happening with all of the POV changes, and some of those switches felt a little bit sudden. There was also a reveal that didn't impact me as much as it should have. I won't say what it is because it is a spoiler. I felt like we didn't have enough breadcrumbs to be able to deliver a strong emotional landing in regards to this plotline. Overall, I really liked this. I think it's an important book, and I'm always happy to see and support Muslim debut authors. There are so many books now being published, written by Muslims and about Muslims. It just really warms my heart that the younger generation gets to grow up with books like this and see themselves in them. That was In the Country I Love by Alaa al-Barkawi. My next read was The Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon, the first volume by Beth, which is a historical fiction series. This was a super quick read. It was only 107 pages, and it was actually the only book that I read this month on audiobook. Actually, no, I'm rereading a book right now on audiobook, but it's the only like non-reread that I listened to on audiobook this month. It's the first in an ongoing series called The Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon. I don't think the number of planned volumes has been announced, but we're currently at 8 volumes, so it's ongoing. I think moving forward with this series, I am gonna read the physicals because I don't know why, but for some reason I wasn't connecting to the audiobook. But I picked this up because I've been hearing so many positive things about this series, and I'm enjoying it so far. I didn't have really high expectations. It's exactly what I expected it to be, and it's really fun, and I really enjoyed it. The series is set in 1883 in Victorian era London, and it uses epistolary storytelling. The story is told through Emma's diary entries. That's why the volumes are very short. The story starts with Emma arriving to Lapis Lazuli House, which is her family home. She owns the property, but she won't inherit it for another 6 months. And she essentially just documents everything and everyone that she encounters at Lapis Lazuli House, and her narration is so much fun. It's so witty and funny and endearing, and I really enjoy reading from her perspective. I think Emma is such a fun character. This is not a series that I feel like I have to binge read. I think it's just something that I will be pretty casual with. I think it's great, especially if you're looking for something shorter, because it's really easy to breeze through these. I will be continuing this series. I don't know when. I will be reading the rest of them at some point, and I really liked it. That was the Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon, Volume 1. Then I read Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson, which is a standalone young adult fantasy. I loved it. I wish I read it earlier. This is set in the kingdom of Ostermere, and it follows our main character, Elizabeth, who was raised in one of the kingdom's great libraries. She grew up being told that all sorcerers are evil, like essentially anyone who uses magic is evil. And in the library, she grew up alongside many magical grimoires who have the potential to become dangerous monsters. And one day, the library's most dangerous grimoire is released and Elizabeth is blamed. And she's like, I didn't do anything, like what's going on? But no one believes her and no one will help her. She has no one to go to except for one person, Nathaniel Thorn, who is a sorcerer and someone who she dislikes very greatly. So as Elizabeth and Nathaniel work together, she finds herself in the thick of a huge conspiracy. And in the process, her worldview expands and she learns more about herself and what she can do. I don't know what it was, but something about this book, this writing style, reminded me so much of Once Upon a Broken Heart, the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy. It doesn't have similar plot lines at all, but the writing felt very similar, like that whimsical, easy to breeze through kind of writing. And our main character, Elizabeth, reminded me a lot of Evangeline in a sense where she was a little naive, she was sweet, she was like a softer female main character, but she was also very determined and she wasn't afraid to stand up for herself and the people that she cares about. I don't know, they're very different stories, so it might just be me that got similar vibes, but just something that I took note of while I was reading it. That's what I was thinking of. Nathaniel, the male lead, he felt like a character I've read before multiple times because, you know, he's your standard like mysterious sad boy who initially comes across as conceited and mean, but actually has a big heart and has some kind of tragic backstory that you gradually unravel, etc., etc. But he was still endearing, and I enjoyed his conversations with Elizabeth. The first half of the book was definitely much stronger than the second half. The second half was a bit hard to get through personally because I felt like everything was dragging a little bit. I was like, okay, let's get a move on. Whereas in the first half, I was breezing through the story. I also felt like the antagonist wasn't really compelling. He felt a little bit cartoonish to me, and because of that, I was kind of losing interest in the plot and the plan to foil their evil plans. The ending also felt kind of rushed and anticlimactic. I think the characters could have been fleshed out a little more, but overall it was a super fun read and exactly what I needed at the time. I think that Margaret really succeeds at crafting a solid, whimsical, standalone fantasy story. And I'm gonna need to go through Margaret's backlist because I really liked this and now I'm intrigued to read more of her books. I will definitely be reading her upcoming novel, Night Eternal, which is publishing on April 6th, 2027. It sounds so good. And also the cover is gorgeous. I'm really excited for that. That was Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. My next read, unfortunately, missed the mark for me, and that was The Paris Match by Kate Clayborn, which is a romance novel. So the plot. So The Paris Match follows Layla, a woman in her 30s who works as a physician. She has recently had an amicable divorce from her college sweetheart. They have stayed in touch ever since they got divorced. It's not like messy or ugly. And they have like a cordial relationship. Layla is invited to her former sister-in-law's wedding. So her ex's sister is getting married in Paris, which is also where Layla spent her honeymoon. So there's a lot of mixed feelings and discomfort there, but she feels like she has to go to support her former sister-in-law. And on the way to Paris, she bumps into the groom's best man and they have an interesting connection. I will start with the one thing that I did like, and that is it doesn't take the typical route with a book about a recently divorced woman who is attending her ex's sister's wedding, because if you pitch that plot to me, I would immediately assume that the love interest would be her ex and it would be like a second chance romance. But that's not the direction that the story goes, and the love interest is very much not her ex in this book. So that surprised me, and it wouldn't have surprised me if I read the synopsis, but I went into this blind, so there's that. And to all the reasons why I didn't really like it. Firstly, I am not a big fan of dual POV in romance-only books because I personally feel like it often takes away from the mystery of the male lead and the yearning of it all. I think it would have been a better experience if it was just in Layla's POV. There are always exceptions. Like one of the books I'm going to be talking about soon is a dual POV and I really liked it, but usually it doesn't work for me. I'm very picky with them. Another big thing for me was the prose. And I know that some people love this book and were raving about this book specifically for the prose and they really like the prose, but it was just too stylized for me to enjoy it. Like mostly the constant use of similes was just doing too much for me. It didn't matter what they were talking or thinking about, whether it was romantic feelings or just simple observations. Everything had to be a simile. Everything had to be compared to something, and it just felt a little exhausting because I felt like they just couldn't have any normal thoughts. But I know that a lot of people love that kind of writing style, so you might like this if you enjoy that. The leads didn't really have chemistry in my opinion, and it took me a long time to warm up to the male lead. Honestly, I would say that I didn't even really warm up to him. Like I just didn't really connect with him. Last point, this book did not need to be as long as it was. I think it was about 450 pages. Why am I reading a romance book that's 450 pages? I think those are all my thoughts. Yeah, it wasn't for me, but that's okay. I know that this worked for a lot of people. Sometimes I wonder if I really am the problem, because I feel like looking back on all of the books that I've reviewed over the last few months, whenever I read a romance book, it's usually a no. That was The Paris Match by Kate Clayborn. My next read was Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands, which is an adult fantasy series and the second installment in the series. I read the first book last year, I think early last year, and I really enjoyed it. It's one of those series that I am comfortable just taking my time with. Like whenever I'm in the mood for it, I will pick it up, and I actually thrifted a copy of the second book. It was very similar to the first installment, and I mean that in a good way. It had like a similar structure. It was a lot of fun. I just really enjoy reading these books. If you don't know, this series follows Emily Wilde, who is a Cambridge professor. She is a scholar, a researcher, an expert on all things fae, and she is currently writing the world's first encyclopedia of fairy lore. She journeys to a village called Huravensvik in the far north to further study fairy folklore, and there happens to be another new arrival who is also her academic rival, and that is Wendell Bamblebee, who is described as insufferably handsome. He frustrates her to no end. Wendell kind of inserts himself in the middle of Emily's research, and as Emily is discovering the mysteries of the fae that she is trying to uncover, she finds herself wondering, who is Wendell Bamblebee? Wendell and Emily are very endearing, and I love how the story is told through Emily's field notes, and there are footnotes throughout all of these books, and I just think they're a lovely touch. They're so much fun to read. I still wouldn't categorize this as a cozy fantasy, but I'm not sure how else to describe it. And the reason why I wouldn't categorize this as a cozy fantasy is because I just feel like there are too many dark undertones for this to be like completely cozy. There are cozy elements in the story, don't get me wrong, but we're also dealing with the kind of fae, like the scary fae. Like, we're not talking about sunshine and rainbows. Also, Emily experiences some crazy things as well as Wendell. I don't know, I personally wouldn't describe it as cozy fantasy, but I know a lot of people do, and I think that's how it's marketed. I don't have the strong urge to continue this series now. I think I'm just taking my time with it, but I will be reading the third book at some point. I don't know when, but I will be there, especially because I heard that she is writing a spin-off or like some kind of novella about these characters. So I will get to it eventually, but I'm in no rush. That was Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands by Heather Fawcett. The next book that I read is one that honestly confuses me because I just had a really weird experience with it. That book is The Unicorn Hunters by Katherine Arden, which is a historical fantasy standalone. This took me forever to get through the first half. The first half specifically took me, I think, over a week to read. I was reading like a chapter at a time. I don't know what was going on. The writing, objectively beautiful. I loved it, but I just wasn't connecting to the story, and I almost gave up on it multiple times. And then the second half, I finished it in a day and I loved it. So I don't know what was going on there. I don't know what was going on with me, but this is when I was kind of in my borderline reading slump era. This is a reimagining of the historical figure Anne of Brittany's story. Anne was the Duchess of Brittany when it was a separate state from France, and also she eventually became the Queen of France. So in this book, Anne was a child when France invaded Brittany, and in present time, France is intending on marrying her to their king. But Anne refuses to be the last Duchess of Brittany, and she arranges a secret marriage to the king's greatest rival while pretending to be compliant with France and their plans. The issue is all of the royal courts have diviners that they use to spy on each other, and it's almost impossible to hide anything in this society. So Anne plans a unicorn hunt in Broceliande, which was a once magical forest that is now immune to divination. And she does this in order for her to wed in secret. I am going to be really honest, I wasn't taking notes when I was reading this, and I don't remember a lot of it. I think I just wasn't engaged while I was reading it. And I think I expected it to have a lot more fantasy than it did because of how it was marketed, and you know, even the title just being The Unicorn Hunters. I was expecting a lot of unicorns, but that's not really what I got. It came across as a medieval historical fiction with sprinkles of fantasy and magic, and I was expecting a little bit more of a balance, but there was a very minimal amount of unicorns. Like, I wanted more unicorns, you guys. The second half was gorgeous. That's where I got really immersed into the story. I thought it was really romantic. The build up to the climax was great. The ending did feel a little abrupt, but it worked. And even though I had like a really bizarre experience reading this book, I'm really glad that I didn't give up on it and DNF it, because I almost did. I wouldn't go into this thinking that it's going to be very fantasy heavy, because it is not. That was The Unicorn Hunters by Katherine Arden. When you're going through a reading slump, the last thing that you do is typically pick up a 900-page book, but that's exactly what I did. I picked up Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. I'm still in the process of reading it, and I read 58%, I think specifically 58% before I had to pause because I had to return my library loan and I couldn't renew it. This book has been on my TBR for years, and because I read Samantha's other book series, The Bone Season, which if you've watched any of my recent videos, you know how obsessed I am with those books now. It motivated me to get to this series, which is called the Roots of Chaos series, I believe. Because of how much I loved the Bone Season books, I was like, I need to read more of her works. It was less intimidating picking this up because I couldn't see how thick the book was because I was reading it on my e-reader. It's really hard to summarize this story because there is so much to discuss. There is so much going on, but this is an epic fantasy standalone. It is dense. There is so much lore. There is so much world building. It's immersive. There are multiple POVs and a huge cast of characters that we follow throughout the story. And because it's an epic fantasy, it takes a hot minute to really get into the story. Like, you have to give it time because in the beginning you're kind of just thrown all of these new terms and all of these characters and you're learning about this world and how it works, and it takes time to immerse yourself in the story. But once you're there, you're there. There is romance, but it is a subplot, as the book is more of a political fantasy, I would say. And it's also a women-centric fantasy, like more matriarch societies, as most of the kingdoms are referred to as queendoms, which I thought was so cool. As someone who reads a lot of fantasy, I just thought it was a nice change for once. I'll try to give you an idea of like the plot lines that we're following in this book. So Queen Sabran, who is ruler of Innis, is duty bound. I don't know if I'm saying these right. I hope I am. She is duty bound to conceive a daughter to protect her realm from destruction. There is an ancient enemy that is awakening and she needs an heir. Then we've got Iad, who is a mage loyal to an ancient secret society. She hides her identity while making her way up to a lady-in-waiting to the queen, and she has been tasked with secretly protecting the queen with her magic from the assassins that target her. We also have POVs of Tane, a woman who has trained to be a dragon rider since she was a child, Loth, who is a friend of Sabran's that was sent away as he was viewed as a threat to her. We've also got Nicholas, who is an alchemist who is given the task of hiding an outsider, and that outsider's name is Suliard. As you can see, we're dealing with a very large cast of characters with a lot of complexities and depth, and I would say the short blurb is the best way to pitch this story, which is a world divided, a queendom without an heir, and an ancient enemy awakens. There are dragons, there's complex political court drama, there are ancient secret societies, as mentioned, there's magic. Brilliantly written, honestly. I can't imagine how many years it took to write and research for this book because there is so much detail. I do think that the multiple POVs can feel a little overwhelming at first because you're just trying to get a grip on the world and you're like, there's so much going on. Once you have a foundation of everything, then it gets easier and you get really engaged and sucked into this world. As you can probably tell, I am really liking it. I just had to put a pause on it because I couldn't renew it, but hopefully I'm hoping that I can finish it in August. That is Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. My last read of the month was The Winged Game by Sophie Kim, which was an anticipated read for me. This was anticipated for me because I read Sophie Kim's The God and the Gumiho duology last year and I was obsessed. I consumed those books. I read them so fast and I loved her writing style. So I was really looking forward to this and it met my expectations. I had so much fun with it. So this is set in the United Kingdom. We follow Tessa Cho and Keon Locke. The sport that they both play is called Carrywitchet, which is described as a rugby-esque game that is also kind of violent and played on top of winged beasts in the air. So very, very fantasy. Tessa was once the United Kingdom's most promising player. She was so popular, she was so loved, and the sport was her entire life. Like, that was all that she lived for until her rival Keon destroyed her career in a single moment and everything came crashing down for her. She was essentially expelled from the sport, and it has been 2 years since that happened at the beginning of this book. And for those 2 years, all she has been thinking about is enacting revenge on Keon and his team and just kind of like watching them plummet down to the bottom ranks of the league. Then out of the blue, Keon, the man who ruined everything in the first place, asks Tessa to join her team and makes her an offer. And she is like, this is an offer that I have to take, because even though I hate him, this is my chance to redeem myself and bring myself back up to the ranks, and everything's gonna work out now. Like, she's got this like plan in her head. She takes up his offer. But the thing is, there's a part of the contract she signs that she has to enter a fake relationship with Keon to gain positive PR for their team. So fake dating is the main trope here. In addition to the fake dating for PR, there is also a core mystery that arises that has the potential to jeopardize both of them, and they have to work together to solve it in order to save their team. Sophie Kim, you will always be famous. She does such a good job at balancing serious conversations and situations with moments that will make you laugh out loud, and that's really hard to pull off, but she does it so well. There are some moments that are just so ridiculous and so silly and funny, and then there are some moments that are very emotional. Her writing is just so fun. I don't know how else to describe it. I just have so much fun with her book. Tessa and Keon's banter was also great, and their relationship felt very earned to me. They very gradually learned more about each other and slowly developed an emotional connection. It didn't feel sudden or rushed, and I really liked how their relationship progressed. It's also casual fantasy. Like, you've got elves and vampires and spells and winged beasts and magic and goblins, like all of the above basically, but it's very casually mentioned. If you're looking for world building, that's not what this book gives you. It's more of a sports romance with some fantasy sprinkled in, and also a mystery. There were also blink and you miss it references to the God in the Gumiho duology, and I ate that up. I love when authors do that. I think it's so cute. So I'm assuming that this is in the same world as those books. Please go read The God in the Gumiho. I love that book. One thing that I didn't love about this book was the amount of swearing in it. It felt like every other sentence at times, and I just felt like it was a bit too much. Just a minor note. Overall, I loved it. I thought it was so fun, and I will read anything that Sophie writes, and I would recommend it. That was The Winged Game by Sophie Kim. Yeah, so those were all the books that I read in July. For some reason, my motivation to read was at the lowest it's been all year this month, but I'm really glad that I still was able to read. I'm hoping that August is a better month for me, and I'm hoping that feeling goes away. For releases that I am most looking forward to reading in August, I don't know if I'll get to all of them. It just depends on my library, but I am really excited for A Trade of Blood by Robert Jackson Bennett, which is publishing August 4th. Then there's Kitten by Stacey Yu, which is publishing on August 4th as well, and Immortal Rose by Alexandra Bracken, which is publishing on August 13th, I believe. Super excited to read those. As from what I'm currently reading, there's Priory of the Orange Tree when I get back to it. And then I am currently reading Daggermouth by H.M. Wolf, but honestly, I'm not loving it. Maybe that will change, but it's not looking too great, but we'll see. You know what I also started rereading? A book that I finished in May, The Bone Season, but on audiobook this time, so it's different. It's like not the same. But didn't you just finish reading that series like a month ago? Yes, I did. But it's fine. I mean, who cares? It's just that I can't remember the last time I went through a book hangover this drastic. I love these books so much, and I was just itching to reread them, specifically on audiobooks, because I heard that the audiobooks are really good. Anyways, the audiobook is fantastic. The narrator is incredible. I think her name is Elena Kerr Collins. Sometimes I have a hard time getting immersed in an audiobook, but the narration is amazing. And I have already noticed so many small details and like little bits of foreshadowing planted so early on, and I'm like, how does she do this? I don't know. Yeah, I need more people to read these books. I don't think I'm ever gonna stop talking about them, so you just have to deal with it. And I cannot emphasize enough how sick of me you are all going to be when The Moth Reborn publishes in February 2027. Quite literally think about it every day. Currently rereading the first book on audiobook, and it honestly, it is kind of a different experience. It's not really the same, and I'm having a good time, and that's what matters. Also, I am thinking about trying to read a Robin Hobb book. I have been seeing so many people talk about Robin Hobb's books and her series, and it's really intriguing me. I'm kind of getting FOMO because I've been seeing it a lot on my Instagram feed recently. I think people say to start with Assassin's Apprentice, which is the first book in the Farseer trilogy, but I think I'm hesitating because I really just don't need to start another really long series and let it consume me, because apparently it's 16 books and I have the muscles for that. Like, I read all of the Shadowhunters books in like a month and a half. I can do it. I'm not sure. I'm thinking about it. If you think that I would like those books, let me know. I'm gonna wrap this up now because I've been talking for a very long time. Please let me know if you have read any of the books that I mentioned in this video, if you have any thoughts on them, if you liked or disliked them, if you have any recommendations for me or anything at all, really, I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.